to this. Okay, so this is number 26 in the Krishnacore Chronicles, and I'm joined by the one and only Porcell from the bands Judge, Shelter, Youth of Today, who else? Violent Children. Right back in the day, I saw that there was the early demo from what was it? The Young Republicans had just come out as well. Someone had found it recently. So welcome. It's going to sound a really first, silly first question, but could you please introduce yourself? And I've kind of already done that a little bit, and I would be very surprised if someone was watching this and they didn't know who you are. But for those that may not, um,
Well, yeah, like you said, I played guitar in all those bands. I played guitar in Bold. I was a touring guitar player for Bold. I was also in Gorilla Biscuits for a year
oh yeah.
when we all had long hair. That was an interesting era. Um, my Krishna name is Paramananda Das. I got that from my guru. It means supremely blissful.
Oh.
It's when I got that name, he also gave me the instruction that I'm calling you Paramananda, spiritually blissful, and it's your job to make other people spiritually blissful. That's why he gave me that name. So yeah, I'm from the hardcore scene, and I'm a devotee.
And what are you up to at the moment? I know you're a yoga teacher, so you've been. I mean, just like locking this down, this interview down. You know, you've been really busy over the last couple of weeks, haven't you, or over the last month?
Yeah, especially the last month. I was on tour with Judge, and then I went right on tour with Bold on the West Coast in California. And then I was teaching yoga for 2 weeks out there. And then also my new band, I'm in a new band called Values Here. And we played a string of shows out there too. So I just got back last week and just kind of recovering from that.
Right, but I really wanted to speak about your spiritual journey. So I've just read Ray's book, which has been really enlightening, if that's the word. It's been quite a really good read. And what what became apparent, and I don't mind admitting and holding my hands up here, I thought that Ray's journey kind of started with the Hare Krishnas, but it didn't, did it? It is kind of his journey towards spirituality started before then. And was that the same with you?
Yeah. When I was growing up, I was raised in I come from an Italian family, so we were Catholic. And we used to go to church. When I was little, we used to go to church every Sunday, but it was a very perplexing thing for me because I was young and I would go to church and it would be like stand up, sit down, kneel, stand up, sit down, kneel. You're reading prayers, you don't really know what they are. You get shoved in a line, you get a wafer stuck in your mouth, and it's just like I didn't get it at all, and nobody explained it to me. It wasn't like, okay, these are rituals, but this is what the meaning is behind the rituals. Nobody told me. Matter of fact, I don't even think the adults knew what was going on. Everybody just kind of sleptwalked through this mass, and it was more. I had the distinct feeling that it was more of a social thing. That the parents would get
Yeah.
together, and then afterwards they would talk, and the kids would play. um, and it was like I guess it was sort of like a pious social gathering, and it didn't really have anything to do with transcendence that I could figure out at least. And I got into punk very early. I probably got into punk at like around the age of 12. And
Okay.
the Dead Kennedys were one of my favorite bands. And I remember one time my dad said, "What do you want for Christmas?" And I said, "The only thing I want for Christmas is records. You don't have to get me anything else. I don't want clothes. I don't want toys. I don't want anything. I just want records." And they made up a big long list of records. And to his credit, he went down to Bleecker Bob's in the lower west side of Manhattan, and he walked in there with my list, and he said, "My son's into punk. He wants all these records." So it was a punk record store, famous punk record store. And one of the records that was on that list was Dead Kennedys and God We Trust Incorporated.
Okay, yeah.
Very anti-religious record. As a matter of fact, one of the songs is called Religious Vomit.
Vomit. Yeah.
And if you remember, the first pressing of the record had the lyrics right on the back cover. They weren't even on the inside on the lyric sheet. So Religious Vomit was, all religions make me want to throw up. All religions make me sick. All religions make me want to throw up. All religions suck. That was basically the lyrics of the whole song. And when my dad gave me the records, he was like, you know what? That Dead Kennedys record is sick. And he was like really angry with me. But coming from punk rock, I was very suspicious of organized religion, and especially my experience of going to church wasn't that great. And then my dad forced me to go to this thing. It's called CCD. Do you know what CCD is?
No, no.
It's religious classes that you go to in order to get your confirmation.
Okay, yeah.
That kind of coming of age ritual and Catholicism. And even though by this time we weren't even going to church, like we were not religious really. But, my dad was religious enough to think that, okay, well, all people that are Catholic, they have to go through they have to go through this confirmation. So I'm sending you a CCD to go to the classes so you can get confirmed. So I was like, I didn't want to go at all. But man, a few of my friends got stuck doing it. And I think it was like every Wednesday after school for a couple of months, we'd have to go to the church. And this priest would come out and he would lecture us for about an hour. And then at the end, he would ask for questions. And the one thing that I noticed about the priest, he was this old Irish priest, and he always seemed like he was in a bad mood. He always seemed angry. Like that was the impression that everybody got. Like he sort of rolled in there with like a chip on his shoulder. And even that, right off the bat, I was like, I thought spiritual people are supposed to be happy and
laid back.
Compassionate. But I don't know. He didn't strike me as a happy person whatsoever. He always just seemed angry. And the hour that he spent with us was mostly just kind of quoting scripture about sin and what's going to happen to us if we sin. And I think I was probably like, I'm not sure exactly how old I was when you get your confirmation. I think it was something like 13, 14, 15, somewhere around there. And I'll tell you something about 13, 14, 15-year-old kids. They're smart. Think they're dumb. They're not. They're sitting there, they're listening, they're absorbing, their brains work. So I remember he was, he would say stuff often like, if you don't accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, you're going straight to hell. And then it would be like, any questions? And me and my friends would raise our hands, ask questions. But sir, what if you come from a place where, they don't know about Catholicism? Like, what if you're an Eskimo? You never heard, your whole life, you never heard of Jesus. You never had the opportunity to learn about Catholicism. What happens to them? And of course, because he was I would say fanatical about what it said in the Bible, he said, oh, they go to hell. And I was like, they go to hell for eternity just because they never got the opportunity to hear about Jesus? And he was like, yep. And that just didn't seem right to me. No. And there was a lot of things that he said that just didn't seem right to me. And I was like, another question I asked was, do people really go to hell for eternity? And he was like, yes, you go to hell and you suffer terribly for all of eternity. And I said, why would God do that to one of his own children? Like, that, like, God's supposed to be compassionate. That doesn't seem compassionate to me. That seems terrible. Like if my dad got mad at me and condemned me to eternal suffering for something that I did wrong, you would think, what a terrible abusive
Yeah.
father. But you're trying to tell me that this is God. And I just couldn't accept it. I just couldn't accept it. And there was a lot of things that he would just quote, and then we would ask him, we would say, why? And he would say, because it says it in the Bible, and if you don't follow the Bible, you're going to hell. Like that was his answer for everything. That's not an answer. That's not a rational, logical answer. It says it in the Bible. Listen to God or you're going to hell. And he would say it like that in a very kind of, you know, fanatical way. And that left a really bad impression on me, a terrible impression. And I think any kind of kid who's got an ounce of rationality in his head is going to go to those CCD classes and just be like, I don't buy it. I don't buy
No.
one bit of it. I don't buy that this is spirituality. I don't want any part of it. And, plus I was listening to Crass and Dead Kennedys and a lot of that kind of stuff. And it just really turned me off to religion.
Okay.
It didn't, I don't necessarily think that it turned me off to seeking out higher things in life because I was very much into that. But it turned me off from fanatical, sectarian religion that made no sense. I didn't want any part of it. So I didn't really, I went on and I got my confirmation and I was just like, okay, well, I'm just doing this to please my dad.
Yeah.
And after that, I
Yeah.
never went to church again and I didn't really look back. But probably my first avenue of transcendence was straight edge.
Okay.
Because also around the same time, I was a kid in school who wanted to be cool, and I was on the football team, and I was sort of on the top of the social food chain. And, you know, in the 80s, if you wanted to be like that, if you wanted to be the cool kid in school, you had to party. That's just the way that our kind of kid society was structured.
Yeah.
And so I used to drink beer and I would go to parties. I had an older brother that used to bring me to parties too. And I don't know what it was about intoxication, but I tell you, I never liked it. Never. I was never into it. I just was sort of socially pressured into it. I remember even when I was a kid, I was probably like 8 or 9 years old, and my parents had a like get together with other parents, and they were drinking beer and getting drunk. And I remember I said to my dad, "Hey, let me try your beer." And so my dad, he was drunk and he just thought it was funny. And, he gave me like a half of a beer. And I went off in the corner and I drank it. And it actually got me drunk. And I was like, oh my
Yeah.
God, this is terrible. Why did I remember even my 8-year-old mind was like, this is terrible. I don't want to be like this. Why did I do that? Oh my God, this is awful. Every single time I got drunk, I would go to a party, I would get drunk. This is terrible. I'd wake up hungover. I'm never doing that again. The next Friday, Saturday night would come around and I'd be like, I would go to a party and everybody's getting drunk and I just got kind of forced into it. Um, and it was also around the time when I was like 15 years old, when kids in my grade started up in the ante of intoxication. Like it wasn't just beer anymore. Now it was Jack Daniels. Now it was vodka.
Yeah.
Now it was blackberry brandy. Now it was a lot of them started doing coke. A lot of them were doing pills. Um, and I remember one time I went to a party and somebody was making screwdrivers, which is vodka and orange juice.
Yeah.
And you don't really taste the vodka, so I probably drank like 2 glasses of these screwdrivers, and I got so violently ill. I was throwing up and throwing up and throwing up. And I swear to God, I was hungover for a good like 48 hours next morning. Because I mean, I was 15. I probably weighed, I don't know, 90 pounds. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Forcing vodka. beer is like, what's beer? It's like, I don't even know, 8% proof, 6% proof, something like that. Like it's
Yeah,
alcohol
not
content
even that. Yeah, yeah,
compared to vodka, which is almost like pure alcohol.
yeah.
So when you go from beer for the first time to vodka and you're drinking a lot of it, your body just like violently rejects it. And I remember after that, I was so sick for like 2 days. I was like, I have to stop doing this. Like, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this, but I wanted to. And then there was a fateful day that I got in my hands the first Minor Threat 7-inch, and it had that song Straight Edge on it.
Mm.
And when I heard that song, that's the power of music. The power of music is that somebody articulates through music exactly what you're feeling,
Yeah,
exactly what's in your head. They say maybe it's not even articulated in your head yet. You can't really express it, but somebody expresses it poetically in a song and it hits you right here in the heart.
yeah.
And that was Minor Threat, Straight Edge. It hit me right here. And I was like, yes, that's exactly how I felt. And, there was nobody else in my school that didn't drink. Maybe like the nerdy kids didn't drink, but I didn't hang out with them. But none of my friends like didn't drink. I didn't know it. My parents drank. My brother was a party animal, my older brother. All my friends were party animals. So I didn't know anybody that didn't drink or wasn't into drinking except for myself. And when I heard that song, I was like, oh my God, there's this person in Washington, D.C. His name is Ian Mackay. I don't know him, but he feels exactly the same way that I do. I have a brother out there somewhere. And it gave me like the courage just to say, fuck it. I'm not doing that shit anymore. Like literally, I heard that song and I related to it. And it gave me whatever it is, it kind of lit that fire in me where I was just like, I'm not going to do this anymore. I don't give a crap what my friends think of me. And let me tell you, my friend, it was a huge backlash. Like, I remember next time I went to a party, I was like, I'm not going to drink anymore. I'm straight edge. People would be like, what's straight edge? I was like, I don't drink. I don't do drugs. I'm just into clean living. And my friends were like, what are you, a fucking faggot? Like that, like they couldn't wrap their heads around it. Like they would belittle me, they'd call me names, and very soon they didn't want to hang out with me anymore because I wasn't fun, quote
Mm.
unquote. So I lost a lot of friends, but at the same time, around that time, I started going to shows. And a real fateful time in my life, I would go to shows, but nobody was straight edge. I mean, you have to realize that when Minor Threat broke up, like the mid 80s, straight edge was kind of something that was thought was over. It
Yeah,
was just kind of cool little thing that happened with Minor Threat. Not even all of the band Minor Threat were straight edge. It wasn't like a movement. It was basically a song that Ian Mackay wrote. It was kind of a cool song. It didn't really resonate with people. And, that was it. It was over. So when I would go to shows with an X on my hand, people just thought it was stupid. They're like, what do you think you're from 1982 or something? Like, straight edge is over, dude. I don't know what to tell you. You missed the boat. Like all the older kids would say stuff like that. And then there was that fateful day that I walked into this club in Connecticut to see a show, and there was Ray Capo sitting on the couch inside of the club with an X on his hand. I'd never met him before, but I walked in and he had an X on his hand. And I was like, oh my God, there's somebody else straight edge. So I ran up to him. I had an X on my hand. And I was like, oh my God, you're straight edge. That's awesome. And we instantly became friends. And from that moment on, it was like me and Capo versus the world. Like
yeah.
literally. That's just how it was. We became really good friends. We hung out all the time. I didn't have to hang out with my friends at school anymore. I just hang out with Capo and we would go to shows, big X's on our hands. Um, And we had our own little kind of crew that we called the youth crew, which was like the younger kids that were becoming straight edge because all the older kids thought it was a dumb thing to do. So there
Mm.
wasn't any older kids. The older kids, meaning the kids that were 20,
Yeah,
21,
yeah, yeah. I
and
know what you. Yeah,
we were 16,
mm,
you know? So when we looked at somebody that was 20, we're thinking, oh, that person's like an adult.
yeah.
But there was a few younger kids. There was like the kids from Bold that went to my high school. They were part of that original youth crew. There was some kids from Albany, some other kids from Connecticut. We had like a little crew and we put X's on our hands. And that was about it. It was a very like kind of small thing. And everybody thought like, oh, look at how cute these kids are. They're copying Minor Threat. And they actually took that Minor Threat song seriously. What a bunch of dorks.
Yeah, yeah.
But that was the first, I would say that was the first kind of spiritual lesson that I learned in this life. That I don't want this kind of like mundane, negative, destructive life anymore. Like I'm going to reach in my life for a little light. And that was straight edge to me. That was my first kind of foray into spirituality. Like I'm trying to get out of the darkness. I'm not going to take part in this stuff anymore. I'm going on a totally different route. I don't give a crap if it's not popular. I don't give a crap what people say about me. This resonates in my heart and feels right to me, and I'm going to go this way.
Yeah.
And doing that really set me up for spirituality in the future because all spirituality is the same thing. It's reaching for something higher, for something transcendent, and trying to get yourself out of the muck and dirt of the material world. And also, it's a very hard thing to do because culture is super materialistic, super materialistic. 99% of the people are going this way. Economic development is king. If you don't do that, then you're a loser. That's the goal of life, to make money. And, if you go this way, it really takes a lot of kind of determination to go against the grain of what everybody's doing. But I had already done that with straight edge. And so it made it more easy for me when I eventually became a Krishna devotee.
Yeah.
I was running around the streets with a shaved head and a ponytail and like orange clothes. Um, I probably wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't have that strong conviction from doing it in straight edge.
Yeah.
So that was a start. I mean, I could go on.
I think it's really interesting that you said that you note the first transcendental experience. So I grabbed my pen because I wanted to write it down to remind me. The first transcendental experience was straight edge. And we spoke just briefly, I know, before I pressed record about how straight edge and hardcore stroke and more than hardcore, I think, straight edge itself has become a space for kind of seeking the transcendental. That straight edge itself is, as what you're saying, a kind of spiritual journey.
For sure. For sure. That's why I think that a lot of straight edge kids do eventually go on and get into Krishna or spirituality or something, animal rights, something that's they're they're opening themselves up and their energy to something that's greater than themselves.
Mm. Yeah.
And that is the beginning of spiritual life, I would say. So, that was a big lesson. Also, vegetarianism was a big lesson for me too. Like you were saying at the beginning, I went to my very first hardcore show was MDC, Millions of Dead
Yeah.
Cops. And the whole time that they played, the singer, Dave, was just saying stuff about vegetarianism. You can't eat meat. It's cruel. They had that song, Corporate Death Burger.
That's
you
right.
know
Yeah.
these companies like McDonald's, they kill these animals in the cruelest way, and you're eating all that violence and it's getting into your consciousness. And if you could see the inside of these slaughterhouses and what they do to these poor animals, you would think it was the most disgusting thing ever. You could eat healthier when you're vegetarian. And then he even said stuff like, he said, nobody in this band uses deodorant. You want to know why? Because we eat so cleanly and we eat fruits and vegetables, which don't have toxins in them. And when you're eating clean like that, your body doesn't smell. And it's only when you
Okay.
fill your body with junk food and meat and stuff that just rots in your system that gives your body a bad smell. And I remember thinking, like, wow, that's super cool. But everything he said, it resonated with me. Unfortunately, I think I was 14 years old when I went to that show. So I wasn't in charge of what I ate. My parents were.
Yeah.
My parents would put stuff in front of me and they'd be like, eat it. But it stuck with me. It definitely stuck with me. And I remember I was really into that band, Flux of Pink Indians.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And they had a few vegetarian songs, but they had that one where it had the breakdown. It was a song about vegetarianism from the point of view of the cow. The lyrics were
Yeah.
like,
Do you know what? I should remember. I should know it. Yeah.
you may like my warmth. It may say in the Bible that you can kill me. Um, and all this stuff. And then there's another line that really hit me. It was like, you try to stroke me in the field and then go home and eat me as your meal. And coming from a person who lived in suburbia in, upstate New York, that was so true. There was farms all around me. We used to go and we'd stop at the farms, we'd pet the cows. And I never, ever once made the connection like, oh, this beautiful cow that I'm petting now, I'm eating the same, species when I go home, when I eat a hamburger that's been killed and tortured in so many horrible ways. I never made that connection. But little by little through hardcore, I started to make that connection. And so was Ray. We went vegetarian at the same time. And we wanted to make Youth Today a vegetarian band, which we eventually did with the
How,
song No.
how old were you? I think I was 16 when I went vegetarian. I was in like an anarcho punk, and like you, listening to bands like Crass and Flux, and that's why I should remember the track. My memory's dreadful. And the thing that made me vegetarian was Extreme Noise Terror's Murder. That did, and then listening to Conflict's Ungovernable Force, and then those two, yeah, hit just hit. And for me, I was kind of doing the same kind of thing. Really, I was seeking out not so much spiritual texts, but I was seeking out anarchist texts, and within those anarchist texts and animal rights, I was learning more and more about the slaughterhouse and more about the process, and thought, no, I can't do this anymore. And so went vegetarian when I was about 16, and I've been vegetarian since. So is that the sort of same age that you guys?
No, I became a vegetarian when I was 18 and I moved out of my house and it was actually when I moved to New York City. Me and Ray moved to New York City. I was 18 and he was 19. And I had an idea that, okay, I'm in New York, I'm starting this new life, I'm on my own. And I had an idea that, yeah, I should try to become a vegetarian. I was kind of putting it off. And then one day, um, it was around Christmas time, and I was in this neighborhood called Brooklyn Heights, which is a beautiful neighborhood. It's like where all the millionaires live. It's right in Brooklyn, across from Manhattan, and they have this beautiful walkway that goes right along the water, and it's like just an amazing view of Manhattan. Um, and so I was in Brooklyn Heights, and it was around Christmas time, and it was snowing, and I heard this Christmas music, and there was all these people gathered around a truck that was like playing Christmas music pretty loud. And I was like, why is everybody? And it's like, well, why is everybody gathered around that truck? I was just kind of curious. And I walked to that truck, and it was a PETA truck, People for the
Ah,
Ethical Treatment of
yeah.
Animals. And it was just a truck. And on the side of the truck, they had a TV screen. And they were just playing. The only thing it was with no explanation was beautiful Christmas music, um, soundtracking slaughterhouse footage.
Okay, yeah,
And it was
yeah.
like the most brutal. I mean, it's just slaughterhouse footage. Slaughterhouses are brutal. That was the very first time I'd ever seen slaughterhouse footage because, this was before the internet. This was before YouTube. You couldn't, you didn't know what it was like inside of a slaughterhouse. You didn't know how animals were killed. They keep it a secret. They necessarily don't want you to see because it's so brutal that you would never eat meat again if you saw it. So I walked up there, and there was just something so eerie about seeing these cows slaughtered, and pigs and chickens, and cutting the beaks off of chickens. It was just like, it was so inhumane and so brutal. And it was so eerie because it was soundtracked by this really nice Christmas music. And there was something about that nice music, contrasted with the brutality of the slaughterhouse scene, that it really made such a big impact. I sat there and I watched it for maybe like an hour.
Okay.
And then I went home and I was like, that is it. I am not eating meat anymore. That's it. Like, that was like the nail that really kind of drove it home for him.
Mm.
And that was when I was 18. So,
Wasn't easy to be a vegetarian back
oh
then, was it?
God, you want to know what year that this was like?
You know,
It was like 1985.
you know,
Health food stores didn't have vegetarian food.
I
You could
know,
barely find tofu.
I know. And you could buy that like that really dry kind of soya those soya chunk things. I don't know if you get over them in the US, but we got them over in the UK, and it was just horrible. It was just awful.
I mean, when me and Ray went vegetarian, we would eat peanut butter and jelly, pizza, and then we would go to the health food store and they had this kind of like chickpea burger mix. And it
Oh,
was like powder, and you'd mix it with water, and you put a
yeah.
little oil in it, and you make these patties. They're actually delicious. We
Mm.
used to eat them all the time, and they were vegetarian. We make these like little vegetarian kind of burgers, and we throw them on a burger bun, and eat them. They didn't even really have veggie burgers back then.
No, no, they
I
didn't.
remember in New York City, they finally opened up a vegetarian hot dog place. It was called Moon Dogs. And man, when they opened that place, we used to eat there all the time. And then there was one restaurant that was on St. Mark's. It was called Dojo's. And they used to have a vegetarian burger. It was called the Hajiki burger. It had seaweed in it. It was just tofu and seaweed in a pita with tahini sauce. And man, me, Walter, Ray, kind of youth crew type people, Sammy, we used to go there like all the time and get that Hajiki burger. That was like, that was the most delicious thing that we could find back then, sitting around eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches all day.
So you're saying about how straight edge for you became a spiritual journey and kind of transcendental in nature. And also, we talked about a little bit again before we came on it because I was talking about Balaram Das from N4S who came to spirituality via anarchism and that notion of that kind of anti-material world element that's in both. And then and then now you're talking about use of today, obviously, and then Judge. I mean, Judge was kind of mythical in itself, and sitting, that around that figure of Mike Judge, who's still kind of a mythical figure. Um, but for me, and this is kind of for the Krishnacore as well. I think it's Ray has said this, and I've read it when talking or when reading, sorry, about Christian punk as well. is that what's really important was that you guys did the most punk thing because the, when I got into punk and the kind of stereotypical notion of the punk is that, you went out and you took drugs and you were self-destructive and you drank. And that's what I did, people who watch these episodes and know me, I'm a recovering alcoholic. So for you, you didn't like getting drunk. For me, I took it to the other extreme. Um, and it nearly killed me. But that was a kind of stereotypical punk. But what you guys did, not only did you rebel against mainstream culture and your kind of parent culture, and rebel against, you rebelled against punk in itself. You did what many Christian punks and what Ray said. In fact, you were more punk than anyone because you rebelled against punk. You said, "No, I'm not going to be doing
What
this."
was cool about that too is we wanted to do that
Yeah,
because we thought, look at these people at these punk shows. They have mohawks, but they're doing exactly the same thing that everybody else does in mainstream society. What a bunch of suckers. They are a bunch of mainstream losers in dirtier, grungier clothes. They listen to music, they get drunk, and they get in fights. What kind of rebellion is that against mainstream culture? That is mainstream culture, just in different clothes. And so we thought, we're not going to dress like that. That's why youth today dress like a bunch of jocks
okay,
with
it's
our
interesting.
sweatshirts and our pegged pants and our, you know, Nike shoes and our Vans and stuff. We didn't want to dress like punk rockers because we didn't identify with them. We thought that I didn't like it. I didn't like it. I would go to CBGBs and see people like shooting heroin in the bathroom and snorting, sniffing glue, and so racked out of their minds, they're like passed out in the corner. And I was like, this isn't my tribe. Like, this isn't what I'm into. Like, I don't even like this. So, luckily for us, youth of today kind of found our own tribe. And it was like you said, we were the rebellion against the rebellion.
Yeah.
And to this day, I feel like that. I feel like if you want to really go against, if you look at mainstream culture and you don't like what you see, then don't do what's in mainstream culture, or else you're just the same.
And what sort of backlash did you get from the punk community? Um, I,
I
I,
mean,
go on, sorry.
we, I tell you, youth today, we probably would have gotten our asses kicked every single show. I remember the first time we played CBGB's, we were at that backstage. CBGB's had a little tiny backstage right in back of the stage, and we were putting X's on our hands. And the guy that booked the show was, at CBGB's, his name was Johnny Stiff. And when Johnny Stiff saw us, and he was friends with, he liked us. Like, he thought we were cool. He liked the band. Um, he put us on a great show. We were playing with Agnostic Front. That was our first CBGB show. We're playing with Agnostic Front. And the place was packed. And we're back at stage. We're just about to go on, putting X's on our hands. And kind of out of care for our safety, he was like, "What are you guys doing? What are you guys doing?" And we're like, "Dude, we're straight edge, man. We're putting X's on." He was like, "You don't understand, man. This is New York City. This isn't Connecticut. This isn't upstate New York. This is New York City, man. This is a really violent place. That crowd out there is really violent. And they're not going to take kindly to a bunch of people with X's on their hands telling them not to drink and do drugs when they're drunk and fucked up on drugs." He's like, "If I were you guys, I wouldn't do it, man." He was like, "You don't even understand. Drugs and drinking are such a part of the New York hardcore scene. You're never going to change it. You're not going to change it. The only thing that's going to happen is that you guys are going to get your asses kicked. So just don't do it, man. Like, say whatever you got to say, but you're going to really cross a serious line if you go out there and you start like preaching straight edge to that crazy ass crowd out there." And I tell you, man, I remember me and Ray were looking at each other. We're like, shit, we got to do it. We already had the X's on our hands. And we just went out there, we said our piece, and you know, we were very lucky because Agnostic Front were the kings of New York hardcore. They were the absolute king, even back then. They were the legends. They were the leaders. Like Roger and Vinny, they were New York hardcore.
Yeah.
They were the kings of New York hardcore. Everybody loved them. Everybody respected them. They freaking started it. Um, and when me and Ray were in Violent Children, we used to play with Agnostic Front all the time, and they really liked us. They thought we were really cool. Actually, Agnostic Front asked Ray to try out for drums
Oh, did
when
they?
they were doing Victim in Pain. Like they really liked him. They liked the way he moshed and stage dived.
Mm.
So he almost joined Agnostic Front. So they really liked us. And I remember like when we first started going to CBGBs, Vinny Stigma would personally take me around and he would introduce me. Hey, Billy Psycho, this is Porcell. He's in this new band Youth Today. They're a really good fucking band.
Mm.
Jimmy Gestapo. Hey, this is Porcell. Him and Ray are from that band Youth Today, man. A really good band. We played with them over in Connecticut at their first show and they were great. And they did that on purpose because, it was a violent place. And they were trying to have our backs, you know what I mean? So they gave us that Agnostic Front stamp of approval, and then nobody's going to fuck with us because we're friends with Roger and Vinny. So I'm eternally indebted to those guys because if it wasn't for them, when we walked out on that stage of CBGBs with X's on our hands, people would have probably just killed us. Like, no joke. We probably just would have got stomped out by a bunch of fucking drunk skinheads. But an Agnostic Front went on afterwards and they're like, man, what did everybody think of you today? They're a great band. Love those guys. So we did what we had to do. But yeah, getting back to the point of it, yeah, we didn't want to be like the punk scene either.
No.
We wanted to drop out of society and get into punk, but we also wanted to drop out of punk and get into straight edge.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good way of saying it, isn't it? Dropping out of punk and getting into straight edge.
Yeah. And luckily for us is that, a lot of bands started, a lot of really good bands too. Uniform Choice, Gorilla Biscuits, Bold, Instead. There was all these like bands that were cropping up that were straight edge and that were really, really awesome bands. And so a whole scene started. And so that kind of became our scene, was the straight edge scene. I mean, there was a point, by like 1988, 1989 for Youth Today, we would play a show and there'd be like maybe 800, 1,000 kids there, and they would all be straight edge.
Yeah.
That's how big the straight edge scene kind of became at that point. But yeah, just getting back to the spirituality of it, it's no coincidence that the regular, two of the regular principles of, you could say Krishna consciousness, but really spiritual life, or even like yoga. I remember I would go to yoga ashrams and they were like, there's no intoxication here. You can't even drink tea. Like, that's how they're like coffee, tea, drinking wine, you can't even set foot in our yoga shala unless you promise that you're not going to do any of that. And, of course, everything was strict vegetarian too. So, those are principles of spiritual life. Until you can sort of get yourself out of that cloud of intoxication where you can think clearly, and until you can get yourself off that platform of bad karma, where you're taking part in a system where you're violently abusing animals on a regular basis, you're stuck.
Mm.
It's like having a big weight tied around your waist and you're trying to get the air. You're trying to swim to the surface to get the air. You can't because those things are just weighing you down. And once you let go of those things, it's very easy to get into spiritual life. I think those two things in particular are real linchpins as far as spirituality goes. Another really big turning point for me, and this was interesting because me and my son went to India just this year in January. And we were in Vrindavan, which is a holy place in India. It's like the land of Krishna. It's where Krishna's pastimes all took place. There's 5,000 temples in this little kind of village almost. And it's very, very sacred to um, devotees of Krishna. So me and my son were there. My son's also a devotee. And we were walking around this really sacred place at Govardhan Hill called Radhakund. And there's books that say that Radhakund is not the most sacred place on earth. It's the most sacred place in the whole entire universe. Like this is where the pastimes of Radha and Krishna take place. So we were kind of reverentially walking around this place, and I saw this one monk, and his name is Bhagavat Maharaj. Now, Bhagavat Maharaj, when I was 18 and I had first moved to New York City, this is just wild. It like when I look back at my life, I can see how my life was just Krishna reeling me in. It's just, unbelievable how coincidence, quote unquote, coincidence after coincidence after coincidence drew me closer and closer and closer to Krishna. So my first like real job in New York City and Ray's real job was there was a health food store that was called Prana Foods. Prana is that Sanskrit word that means your life air. Right next to it was a vitamin shop that was called Ayurveda. Ayurveda is the ancient system of medicine from India.
Yeah.
Those two were right next to each other. This was on First Ave. And then on the next block, there was a vegetarian restaurant that was called Ahimsa, which is the Sanskrit for nonviolence. Yeah. So we were just looking for jobs. And, plus we're like 18 and we have no money because we're just, trying our best to just do our hardcore band and go on tour all the time. So we decided, okay, let's get jobs where we can eat at the job. So I got the job at Prana Foods at the health food store. He got the job at the restaurant at Ahimsa. And it was great because like he'd come in and like I'd get him some groceries and I'd go there and he would like give me a veggie burger or a burrito or something like that. So we were able to like eat also, which is like, when you're 18 years old, all you want to do is eat. So Bhagavat Maharaj, the monk that I saw at Radhakund, he used to be the manager of the Ayurveda store.
All right.
Supplement store. And it was right next door. As a matter of fact, the health food store and the Ayurveda shop, they were connected by a door. So you could walk straight in through the door in the store and go right into Ayurveda. It was almost like part of the health food store. And so one time I went in there, and it was when and plus, not only did I get a job at that store, but unbeknownst to me, there was probably like 4 Krishna devotees that worked there. It was unbelievable. I didn't know they were Krishna devotees, but one of them's name was Mai. Another one had another Sanskrit name. This devotee, Govinda, who became like a famous Mridanga player, worked there. And then also, I don't know if you've ever heard of a band from New York, like a noise punk band called The Unsane. Have you ever heard of The Unsane?
No.
A noise band. They were more of like part of the art scene, maybe more like the Sonic Youthy type noise scene. The drummer's name was Vinny, and he worked there too. So he was kind of punk, but he was also a full-on devotee of Krishna. And so he used to always tell me things like, we'd be stocking the shelves, and he had sleeves of tattoos. that was unheard of back then. I mean, the agnostic front didn't have sleeves of tattoos, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Back then. And so I'd be like, hey, Vinny, man, well, you have a lot of tattoos, bro. And he would say stuff like, yeah, I'm not the body. And I'd be like, what are you talking about? He'd be like, I'm not the body. And I was like, what does that even mean, bro? Like, I don't know what you're trying to tell me. And he'd be like, oh, don't you know? Like, your real personality is that you're a spirit soul. You're not the body. The body is just a covering of the soul. It actually has nothing to do with who you are, your real personality. The person that makes you, you is not your body. It's that spiritual energy that's inside of your body, just like a driver drives around in a car. The driver's got nothing to do with the car. The car is just the vehicle. So your body is just like a vehicle for the soul. And you can imagine, I never heard anything like this before. And I was like 18. My mind was just, I never thought of that before. I never heard that in CCD. It seems like such a basic of spirituality, but you will practically not find that concept anywhere in Christianity, like a simple concept like that. And every day, these devotees that I worked with, they would just kind of like blow my mind with just like spiritual stuff, just basic spiritual principles. And I was just thinking, I didn't even know they were Christian devotees. They never said, I'm a Hare Krishna. They didn't look like Hare Krishnas. They didn't have shaved heads. They wore normal
Yeah.
clothes, but they were devotees. And I was just thinking, like, I don't know who these people are, but they are the wisest people that I have ever met in my life. Like every day going to work was an adventure, like learning new spiritual stuff from these people. And it was also true with Bhagavat. Like one time I was, you know, I'm a musician, I'm playing shows all the time. You know, I would play a show and get home at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I would sleep for like, 3 or 4 hours, and then I'd wake up and I would go to work at the health food store. And then, me and Walter, we would go out and hang out at Tompkins Square Park till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Like I'm barely sleeping, staying up really late, living like musician's lifestyle. And I'm just doing this for months on end. Like I barely slept for like months. You just go on tour, you practically never sleep, or you try to sleep in the van. And so I remember like, man, I'm so tired all the time. And I walked into Ayurveda. This was such a big turning point in my life. This was like, this was major for me. When I walked through those doors of Ayurveda, and I had only been working at the store for maybe like a month or two. I walked in there and I was like, hey, uh, what's your name? And the guy working behind the counter said, Bhagavat. And I was like, hey, Bhagavat, I am tired all the time, man. What do you got for me in here? You got like some, I don't know, lecithin, some spirulina. Like, what should I take, man? I'm tired all the time. He was like, what time do you go to bed? And I was like, well, I stay up all, late. And he was like, do you have a girlfriend? And I was like, yeah. He was like, how often do you have sex with her? And it was such a blunt question. Like, that's his second question. Like, how often do you have sex with her? I was like, I don't know, once, twice a day. I don't know. And I just saw and he was asking me like these questions about my lifestyle. And then he just kind of like put his head in his hands. And he was like, and he kind of pulled one of these things where he's like, kid, sit down. Like, and it was almost like it was very like he did it in a very kind of kind, compassionate way, like almost like a fatherly way. Like he gave me the talk that my own father never gave me. Like the
Okay.
talk, very, very first thing he said, he sat me down. He said, look, sit down. And he said, how old are you? And I think I was 19 at that point. I was like, I'm 19. And he said, look, you're on the cusp of manhood. And he said, a boy does not become a man by turning a certain age. He said, a boy becomes a man when you learn to control your senses. And that includes your tongue, your belly, your genitals. You know, you start to become a man when you start to think, I'm not just going to eat anything that my eyes see and, oh, that tastes good. I'm just going to eat that. And you go out and you eat donuts and ice cream. Like a lot of people just eat like that. They eat whatever
Yeah.
tastes good. I'm going to go to McDonald's and then I'm going to go to Kentucky Fried Chicken. Oh my God, it tastes so good. And they live like that. Whatever tastes good to them, that's what they eat. That's childlike behavior. And he was like, if you're like that, you'll never become a man. And he said, also, if you can't control your genitals, if you're just always going around thinking, oh, I want to have sex with that girl. Oh, I want to have sex with that girl. I want unlimited sex. I'm going to have sex all the time. He said, first of all, your semen is like your vital force of your whole entire body. He said, according to Ayurveda, according to the system of ancient India, system of medicine from ancient India, semen is actually the end of your digestion. All of your energy that you get from food and from exercise and things like that, it all distills down into semen. He was like, semen is so powerful that it can create life. He said that's like the most powerful substance that you have in your whole body. When you're just like getting rid of it, masturbating, having sex, you're literally letting your life force just leak away. Of course, you're going to be tired. He's like, you can get away with it now because you're a kid and you have a lot of vital force in your body because you're young. But if that becomes your habit and you just like are masturbating all the time and you're having sex whenever you want and you develop that as a habit, later on in life, you're going to be chronically tired. And not only that, you're going to leave your body open to all sorts of disease because not only does it make you tired, but your whole entire like immune system and everything is going to start breaking down, and you're going to open yourself up to disease. And he said, not only that, it's not a nice thing to do to other people to just see them and just as objects. And instead of seeing them spiritually as spirit souls, you're just seeing them as objects for your pleasure. That's a childlike thing. And if you want to become a man, you're going to have to get over that. And he just kind of sat me down for like an hour. And in a very fatherly way, he was just telling me all these things about basically grow up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I went in there just on a lark just to try to get some protein powder or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sat me down and he gave me this fatherly lecture that every father should tell their kids. And it had a life change. Like I walked back in that store and I was like, wow, no one's ever said anything like that to me before. Control your senses. I was from a culture where it was like, it was championed when your senses were out of control. It was like, I got trained up in the locker room. Hey, did you have sex with that girl? Awesome. High five. Hey, did you get drunk on the weekend? Awesome. High five.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
It was encouraging you not to control your senses. And if you didn't control your senses, then you were thought of as like cool. I remember when I turned 18, when I was 18, the drinking age was 18. It was before the drinking age went to 21 in America. And so I got home from school. I had already started Youth Today. No, actually I hadn't started Youth Today yet, but I was already straight edge. I would go to shows, X's on my hands. And I came home from school and my dad came home from work and it was right before dinner. And my dad went into the fridge. He pulled out two Heineken beers, took the caps off of them, put them on the kitchen table, and he said, John, you're 18 now. Come have a beer with your old man. And I couldn't believe how out of touch he was with my life, that he didn't even know or bother to care or ask me like if I was straight edge and what's this stuff that I'm into. Like he just wasn't the type of dad that would seem very interested in my life. You know, he went out, he worked, he paid the bills, and that was like his way of being a father. And I
Yeah.
respect that. You know, he did pay the bills and he did keep a roof over our heads, and I have to give him credit for that. Um, but he said, "Come have a beer with your old man." I was just thinking, like, this guy, my own dad, he doesn't know anything about me. I was like, Dad, I don't drink. Like, I haven't drank in like, since I was 16. Like, it's part of my thing. I don't drink. I don't do drugs. I don't smoke cigarettes. And he was like, "What? You're 18 and you're not going to have a beer with your old man?" He's like, "Really?" He was like, "Just have a beer with me." And I was like, "Dad, I don't drink. I'm straight edge. Like, I'm not into it. I'm not going to have a beer with you." And he just looked at me like I was crazy. And he just like was like, "Whatever." And he just kind of put one of the beers back in the fridge and he like started drinking his. And like that gap between us just grew.
Yeah.
He was trying to shrink the gap. "Come have a beer with your old man." And it just created even a bigger wedge between us. Like he couldn't believe that I wouldn't have a beer with him. But like, that's what American culture was. Come have a beer with your old man. Like even your own dad is encouraging you to get drunk.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's something wrong with that. Like I never knew that there was something wrong with that kind of culture till Bhagavat sat me down and really like drove home what it means to be a man. You have to learn to control your senses. And so I tell you, I saw Bhagavat for the first time, since way back then at Radhakarna, and I paid my obeisances to him. And I said, "Maharaj, I don't know if you recognize me, but when I was 19 years old, I worked at Prana and you worked at HIMSA at Ayurveda." He was like, "Oh, yeah, I remember working there." He's like, "I remember you. I remember you from the store." And I was like, "Do you remember the time that I went in there and you sat me down?" And he was like, "Yeah." I was like, "You don't understand. That had a huge impact on my whole entire life. My life was going this way. And you sat me down and you talked to me for an hour, and then my life went this way. And eventually I became a Christian devotee." He was like, "I'm so happy to hear that. I'm so happy to hear that. I'm so happy to see that you became a devotee of Krishna. I'm so happy to see that here you are in Vrindavan at Radhakund. And I'm so glad that like I did something useful in my life that had an impact on your life." And he was just like, "You know what? It's all Prabhupada's mercy." Like his guru was Prabhupada. "It's all just Prabhupada's mercy. Um, and it's all Prabhupada Shakti. I take no, I take no credit for it. It was what Prabhupada taught me that I was able to tell you." Um, and then, of course, we walked away, and my son was like, "What was that all about?" And then I told him, I mean, my son has heard all this stuff before, but I told him, and I was like, he sat me down and he told me all these things. And my son was like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, you told me all that stuff."
Yeah. So,
Um,
so that
but
was that,
every father should have that talk with their son. Every single
yeah.
father.
So that was 18. Um, and so could you talk a little bit about your journey into Krishna consciousness proper then? When did you become a devotee, for instance?
Well, it's so weird. I always felt like when I look back at my life that Krishna was just knocking on my door and like kind of just pulling me closer and closer, closer, and giving me every clue and every opportunity to like meet devotees. I remember I was working at the store and I saw some like it was like my second day at work, and I saw a sannyasi walk past the street. I was just looking out the door and I saw a sannyasi, like a monk, a Krishna monk, with his staff and everything, his danda, and he just walked past. And I remember just seeing him, shaved head, orange robes, like saffron, saffron danda. And I ran to the door and I just looked at him, kind of just like walking down the block. And I was like, wow, who was that? Like, just the sight of a sannyasi had such a big impact on me. And I walked in and I was like Vinny from the Unsane, who was a devotee. I didn't even know he was a devotee. I was like, Vinny, did you see that person? I was like, man, there was something just like magnetic about that person. And he was like, oh yeah, that's a sannyasi. And I was like, what's a sannyasi? He was like, a sannyasi is a monk that gives up the material world. Like he becomes a celibate monk and he only lives for Krishna. He only lives to preach Krishna consciousness and to live a spiritual life, and he leaves everything material behind. And like that was just another earth-shattering thing to me that like I didn't even know the material world was something you were supposed to leave behind. And I said that to Vinny. I was like, what do you mean leave the material world behind? He was like, oh, well, if you become attached to this material world, then you'll take birth again into another body. And, bodily existence is fraught with suffering. You have to go through birth. You have to go through childhood. There's so much suffering in that. You have to become old. You have to become diseased. And then eventually you die. And then you have to start unless you become enlightened, you have to start the whole process over and over again. That's called samsara. It's just this cycle, this wheel of birth and death that you're on, birth and death, birth and death, birth and death. So much suffering. And I was like, I'd never heard anything like that before. Like, it was just like, wow. And it was just like day after day after day, meeting devotees, seeing sannyasis, talking with Bhagavat, becoming a vegetarian, like becoming straight edge. It just seemed like Krishna was reeling me in. And one time I met this sannyasi, his name was Bhakti Tirtha Swami, and he passed away maybe like 15 or so years ago. But I had the great opportunity. He was like a wonderful mystical devotee. He's very mystical. And I remember one time I got the immense opportunity to spend like a whole morning with him. Like I spent like 4 hours just alone with him. It was when I was doing War and Illusion fanzine, actually.
Okay.
And Shelton played a show, and we stayed at his ashram in DC. And then I woke up the next morning. I said, Maharaj, do you mind if I interview you for my magazine? And I had an issue of War and Illusion, and I gave it to him. He's like, oh, I love this. I would love to be interviewed. So I got to spend like 4 hours with him. And not only did I interview him for like 2 hours, and the interview is actually in one of those issues of War and Illusion. It was in the very last one. It was in War and Illusion number 4. But we just kind of like talked. And he was so mystical. And he was telling me, he was like, you were a devotee in your past life. And I was like, really? How do you know? He was like, I know, I can tell. You were a devotee in your past life. And not only were you a devotee, but you lived in the heavenly planets. And I was like, how do you know that? He was like, I know. And he does know. He's like anybody that knew him, he was super mystical.
Okay.
And he said, you were from a heavenly planet where everything was very nice. And all the people were really good looking. And it was just one of those heavenly planets where like you enjoy. And like the heavenly enjoyments is so much higher than what's here on earth. And, once you experience that and your karma runs out, then you have to come back to, he said, but you were a devotee. You were one of these people from the heavenly planets, but you were a devotee. And then your karma ran out and you had to come back to Earth, which is part of the middle planetary system. It's almost like when you're in the heavenly planets, like you take your money that you make and you work hard and then you get a vacation once a year. And you spend all your money and you get the time off from work and you go to Bermuda or you go to Hawaii and you go to these like nice places. That's what like going to the heavenly planets is. You go there for a little bit, you go there for a lifetime, and then you have to come back down to the material world again. So he said, your problem is because you were in the heavenly planets in your last life, you think that everything should be nice in this life. And you get upset when things aren't nice. You get upset when you don't have nice food. And if anybody knows me, that's exactly how I am. And he said, the problem with that is that it's against spiritual life. He said, "You're not here. You didn't take birth on this planet to be comfortable. You took birth on this planet to get close to Krishna." And he said, "You know what, Paramananda? I'll never forget it." He said, "You should be willing to go to hell to get close to Krishna. Because it's not about creating enjoyment on this planet. That's not what it's about. It's actually you should be willing to sacrifice everything
Okay.
to get close to Krishna, because that's your real happiness. Your real happiness has nothing to do with your material situation. So give up this whole idea of wanting a good material situation on this earth. That's not what it's all about. You should be willing to go to hell for Krishna." And I was like, wow. Um, so I don't know how we got onto that subject, but it was
You, I
all
was,
part.
yeah, just asking you about, about how you really got involved with the Hare Krishna movement and became a
Yeah, well, well,
devotee.
that, well that, okay, so that was my point.
Yeah,
My point is that I must have been a devotee in my last life, and even Bhakti Tirtha Swami had actually said that I was a devotee in my past life. And it's said that even in the Bhagavad Gita, if you're a devotee in your past life and you don't reach perfection, you take birth again, and then Krishna gives you all opportunity to kind of pick up where you left off. And I really feel like that was my life's journey. It was just like doors were opening up to me, like circumstances just came, like for some reason, you know, life is, it's like school. We think we're here to enjoy, but no, this is like a big school. Like
yeah,
we're here on this earth to learn lessons. It's not about making money. And I mean, of course, you may have to make, one of your lessons is you may have to go out and make money to take care of your family. And that's also part of love too. That may be your lesson. So I don't want to say that money, isn't important, or, but really to be the object of your life, to make money so you can have a comfortable situation. That's not why we're here. We're here to learn lessons. And when you learn lessons and they become deeply embedded in your consciousness, you don't have to learn them again. It's just like somewhere
yeah.
in my previous lifetimes, I learned that intoxication is not a good thing. And even when I was a young kid, like I didn't want to have anything to do with it. I already learned that lesson in a previous lifetime. So, like, I was never attracted to intoxication. I never liked it. I had already learned that lesson. So, like, when you learn addition and subtraction, then you go on to higher forms of math. Like, that's how everything is, just like a ladder that you're climbing for spirituality. And I just felt like, okay, I became straight edge. And then Krishna gave me all opportunity to become vegetarian. And then I met that, like, what are the chances? I'm an 18-year-old kid moving to New York City. And the first job I get is at a health food
Yeah.
store. It's called Prana Foods. That's filled with a bunch of devotees. I could have been working anywhere, but somehow or other, I just looked in the Village Voice and I was like, oh, I want to eat food, healthy food. Let me get this job at this health food store. And it's filled with devotees who are preaching to me all day long about the principles of bhakti. It's like, that's not a coincidence. And then I meet Bhagavat. That's not a coincidence. And then, the Cro-Mags are part of the New York hardcore
Yeah.
scene, and they're devotees. And I'm meeting them, and I'm talking to Harley, and I'm reading the lyrics to We Gotta Know and Seekers of the Truth, and they're having a big impact on me. It just seemed like every single time I turned, Krishna was there. And then Ray becomes a devotee.
Yeah.
And then, I become a devotee. It was just like, it just seemed like Krishna was there for me, kind of calling to me at every single turn of my life since I was like a kid. And I look back at my life and just the twists and turns of my life, and I just think this can't be a coincidence.
So how old were you when you become a devotee? Were you 18 or 19?
I think I was like, when I actually became a devotee, I think I was like 22.
22. And when were you initiated? Um,
I think I got initiated when I was like 25, 24, 25.
Right. So again, only just very young, really. We look back. It's funny that you said at the start how you were looking at the older kids. When you were 16 and you look at the older kids, when you 20, they were 20. And a lot of my students are in their early 20s, and I look at them and think, crikey, we're not, they're kids really, but they're just young, but it's the
You know,
journey that you went on to that point.
what's funny? I think it's way different in culture right now. I remember being like, now it's just like, oh, don't worry about it. You'll find your path. You have plenty of time, you know. And a lot of times, like kids are like 25 and 26, and they still haven't like figured out what they're going to do with their life. And they're like, it's okay. I'm still young. And,
Yeah,
people don't get married till like way later in life. When I was a kid, people get married like, when they're 22, 23, 24, they're having kids or starting families. Now it's like, people are getting married and starting families when they're like 40.
yeah, yeah,
It's just like, it just seems like getting your shit together is being pushed farther and farther and farther down the line. But when I was a kid, like I was expected, like, my dad, you know, my dad's dad, my grandfather, he came this is the culture that my family came from. He came from Italy when I think he was like 18 with my grandmother, and they were just like teenagers, and they came to America penniless. They barely had
wow,
any. And my grandfather came to New York City. He worked 3 jobs, 7 days a week. He didn't take a day off for years and years and years. He worked 3 jobs, 7 days a week. My grandmother also worked herself to the bone. He put himself and my grandmother through college, through pharmacy school. They both became pharmacists just through sheer hard work when he was like 18, 19, 20. Like he was working hard, he was determined. Like he was like, he was like, I got to get my life together now. I got to like, I got to have a family, and I got to have a means to take care of a family, and I got to have like a good job, and I got to
yeah,
work hard. And, he did it. Like he worked really hard for years and years and years. Him and my grandmother graduated from uh, college with pharmacy degrees. My grandfather, this whole time that he's working 3 jobs, 7 days a week, is saving every dime. Like he's not going out and buying like a $8 cup of coffee like I do.
no,
He's saving every dime and putting it away and saving and saving. So by the time he graduated, in just like, a few years, he had enough money to start his own pharmacy, which he did, which became super successful. And then when he was old, he sold the pharmacy to like CVS or something like that, or I don't know, one of these like pharmacy chains for like a ton of money. And he retired off of it. He was a real success story, but like he worked hard from a young age and was focused on what he was going to do. And so that was kind of like the culture that I came from. Like I remember like when we did Youth Today, you could say that, okay, well, this is just a stupid thing. These guys are in like a hardcore band. We took it so seriously.
yeah, I'll bet, yeah,
We were like, we're going to tour relentlessly. We're going to become a big band. We're going to play everywhere. We're going to put out a record every year. We're going to tour on that record. We're going to go to Europe. Like, we're going to practice all the time. We're going to be the best band we can possibly be. And we took it super seriously. If we're going to do this band, we're going to dedicate our whole entire life to it, which is what we 1000% did. Like I woke up in the morning and I went to sleep at night. I was just thinking, what can I do for this band? Like, how can I push the band for? How can I book a tour? Can I write some songs? Can I rehearse? We got to rehearse. We got to go on tour. We toured relentlessly. relentlessly. We played any show we could possibly get. We would go on tour. We didn't care. Pay us $20. We'll survive somehow. you know, and that was it. Like we worked really hard at that band. And I remember like even when I was like 20, 21, I was like, man, I got to get my life together. Like I've got to really figure out what I want to do in life. And when I got into Krishna at that young age, I was like, okay, well, this is what I want to do. I want to be a devotee. Like, and I dedicated my life to that. I
Yeah.
moved into the temple. I did service all day long. I studied. I learned the Bhagavad Gita. I went to India. I studied in India for hours on end. I learned Bhagavad Gita. I took it seriously. I was like, you know, I became a monk. I became a celibate brahmachari. Like it was just a different kind of culture back then. It was like, if you're going to do this, you do this and you put your all into it. And so, even from like a young age, when I decided that I was going to become a devotee of Krishna and learn all about Krishna, like I dove in. We all did. Ray did, the whole band, Shelter did, you know, and when we joined Shelter, we also did the same thing, toured relentlessly, put out fanzines. Like we were like, okay, we have this opportunity. We have like a microphone and an audience. Let's tell them about Krishna. Let's tell them about bhakti. This is our service. And we took it really seriously that
Yeah.
first we're going to learn from ourselves who's Krishna, what is this system of bhakti yoga, what it's all about. And then we're going to go out and we're going to give it to people because we had that firm conviction that it's not material things that this world needs. America has every material thing you could want: microwaves, cars, big houses. Everybody's got a car, no matter how poor you are, running hot water. Like America's got everything. Like you go to these third world countries, you understand how rich and affluent America actually is. Um, but everybody's miserable because they don't have spiritual life. They don't know anything about God. And so we had that firm conviction, like this is a real need in society. Like this isn't a joke. Like people are suffering because they don't know about spirituality. And we kind of like took that very seriously that we're going to try to give at least the basics of what we knew to other people. And you know, I think it had an impact on people. I mean, you even take a thing like straight edge, which is such a basic spiritual principle. Like that's like the
Yeah.
basic of becoming like a human being. Like you don't ruin your brain with intoxication. It seems so simple. But in a materialistic culture, it's such a revolutionary thing. And even when we were doing youth today, like people would come up to us and be like, your band changed my life. I was like on the road to becoming an alcoholic. I was on the road to becoming a drug addict. And I heard you today and I went to see you guys and it just had such a big impact on me. It revolutionized my whole life. Like we would hear that all the time, even for something as simple as straight edge. Can turn a person's whole life around. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we saw that, okay, straight edge, vegetarianism, spiritual principles, controlling your senses, like these are things that the youth needs to hear. And we like really like from the time I was, 22 to the time I was 30, that was my life. And we worked really hard at it.
And of course you're still doing it, aren't you?
Yeah. I mean, I don't do it like we used to do it. Like it's not my whole life now, but yeah, we still tour. Shelter's going to be playing in California in a couple of weeks. Youth of Today is playing. And I mean, I do it because there's like a demand. Like usually this is how it goes. Our booking agent will be like, hey man, this festival really wants you guys to play, or this club really wants you guys to play. And we're like, okay. Um, if there's a request for us to play, usually we'll be like, okay, well, if our schedules are cleared, we'll
Yeah.
do it. Because I think we all still kind of stand behind the music and the message behind the music. And so for us to go out and play Youth of the Day songs, play Make a Change, play Break Down the Walls, play Prejudice, play One Family, play No More, play Thinking Straight. I mean, these are all things that we still stand behind 1000%.
Yeah. And do you
Maybe
still do you see it as service as well? Yeah.
without doubt, I see it as a service, especially shelter. You
Yeah.
know, shelter is pretty much direct devotional service. Yeah, I do see it as service. I see it more, for me, I see it more as like I've had so many great teachers and influencers in my life and people that kind of just stepped into my life and had a huge impact on my life, and their impact caused my life to come to such a higher place. Then what can I do? It's my duty to pay that forward. Even like people like Ian MacKaye, that guy will probably never know the impact that he had on my life and the impact that that song Straight Edge, like hearing that song for the first time, like wow, that that changed my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And in
a
the
lot
same
of
way
these
that you're changing people's lives, aren't you? As you say.
hopefully, I mean, music changed. I mean, music and all these bands, even like the Dead Kennedys and Agnostic Front, like definitely like the Cro-Mags. Those bands had such an impact on me.
Yeah.
Music's powerful. Like you take a message and you put that with music, and man, oh man, it goes right in. There's something that just like when you put it to music, it just goes right into your heart.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's quite a good sort of place to stop, really. I think I could sort of sit here and listen to you all night. You had a bit of a tough act to follow after me talking to Tony last week. Um, I
Yeah,
mean,
Tony
the
probably
guy,
got a lot of good stories.
he's a legend, isn't he? And of course you are as well. And there are so many of you in the scene that are. But I think it's been really interesting, um, kind of listening to your spiritual journey, and that's what I really wanted to dig down into, and that journey that from being straight edge, moving into Krishnacore. But it was really interesting how early on you said about the straight edge journey being transcendental and spiritual in its own right. You said about the controlling of your senses is a basis of any kind of spiritual practice, and of course that's what straight edge does, isn't it? Is a controlling of your senses. Um,
Yeah, you know what? You know what's sad? You see all these modern religions, and even like when I was going to church, there's no mention of controlling your senses. There's not one mention of it. Until you can kind of get control of your own kind of base desires, or at least regulate them, at least regulate them. Um, that's just, it's going to be the weight that's going to hold you down from transcendence. And I see a lot of sincere people, and they just never got this information. They may be religious, they may be spiritual, they may be pious, they may be trying their best to, be kind and offer a helping hand to people, but that's not necessarily becoming connected with God. That's not necessarily bhakti. That's just material piety. If you want to really know and love God, there's spiritual principles that you have to follow, and there's regulations that you have to follow in life, because you have to take that weight off so you can fly. And unfortunately, that has become, it might have been like that, you know, years ago in Catholicism. It probably was like that, but for some reason over time, like that's been lost, at least in my experience of like what the Catholic Church was like growing
yeah,
up. And it's kind of sad in a way. That's why I feel very fortunate that I came to Krishna consciousness, because you read the Bhagavad Gita and it's like, wow, everything's in there, everything. Like you could just have the Bhagavad Gita alone and just study that text, and
Yeah, I know.
it gives you every single thing that you need to know in order to become a lover of God. Or at least the basics, you know. And it's funny because the Bhagavad Gita is considered like an introductory text.
Yeah.
You know, you could basically just have the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam, and those two books. Bhagavatam is like a set of, you know, a dozen or so books, but like you could just read those two books, and you could actually perfect your life. It's amazing. There's so much information in there.
So, but it's been absolutely fantastic speaking with you, and thanks for taking up my invite to do this.
Thanks for
Um,
inviting me. I feel like
been
we have
fantastic.
friendship now. Never met
Good,
each other. We're friends.
good. Okay, I'm going to stop recording. So thanks a lot, and I'll see you later on.